what would you say is the one thing that could sum up your career path and your direction to where you are in one sentence?
I help organizations take on that change journey.
What's on the board's mind in terms of when they say we need to increase our profit to revenue by 20%? And then how does that translate to their willingness to get involved?
Company listed on the stock exchange, so there are shareholders. Shareholders have an expectation of dividends, increasing value, because they bought shares.
Hey, and welcome to the Change Leaders Playbook, bringing you all things delivery leadership in a podcast. I'm Cliff, an experienced leader of change initiatives and advisor with a passion for the teams that are leading the way. I'm joined today by my guest, David Dyer, a motivational tech leader and board advisor who has held multiple CIO and CTO roles across various industries, including retail and e-commerce. Now, David has a unique view of what matters to boardrooms and how that shapes the delivery of market-leading products. This is going to be another episode packed with actionable insights and lessons. So let's get into it. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cliff. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So, David, I'm going to do the usual thing today of just find out a little bit more about you, just in terms of what would you say is the one thing that you could sum up your career path and your direction to where you are in one sentence? Make it long if you want.
Can I have a really long sentence? No, no, okay. I guess really, in essence, what I do is I help organizations take on that change journey. So usually I'm brought in at one point, like point A, they want to get to point B, maybe they know what that is, maybe they don't, and it's to bring them on the journey. Now, whether that's an individual, whether it's an SME, whether it's a big corporation, it's all about that journey. And what I'd also add is it's about the people on the journey. So whether it's a tech change, whether it's business as usual, it's all about the people.
Amazing. That's really good. So with all that in mind, I'm really interested to get a view from you around, just generally speaking, what's your observation been around working in various organizations as an advisor and seeing how different organizations work and how they want to tackle change? Now, from my experience, there can be a lot of let's just say inconsistency and differing personalities and challenges in actually just getting synergy. What's your take on it? What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think a lot of organizations are very similar. People, because it's not an organization thing. This is why I said at the beginning, people, it's a transformation and a journey that people go on. People are in organizations. People are part of the ecosystem of organizations. Yes, we use technology, but it's people, process, technology in that order for a reason, because if you don't engage the people, it's not happening. And so pretty much all the organizations I've been in, the key differentiator is the people. And as leaders, as boardrooms, what we have to do is create that vision that's clear, compelling, understandable, sell it effectively, communicate that to the wider business. We call it stakeholders. We call people, they're just people, right? We call them stakeholders, but they're people. So we communicate this to the people, both who are working for us, who are our customers, who are our suppliers, everybody in that ecosystem. And what we have to do is get them on board. Now, something that's a change, that's changing ways of working, changing our products, changing whatever it might be, there will always be some people who are resistant to change. And so what we need to be doing is having that clarity, having that understanding, getting the engagement. And how do we do that? It's communication. So the difference is, to go back to your point, always bring me back on point, because I go off on these tangents, right? So always bring me back. But the challenge and the difference is in how the message is communicated. Is it communicated? Is it clear? How are people engaged? Are they even engaged? Is it something that we're doing with the business? So business transformation, digital transformation, is about changing the way people work. It's not about putting in a new system, even if we are putting in a new system. Because do we do it with the business, or are we doing it to the business? And I don't want to steal your thunder for later on, but because we'll come on to that, where do things fail? But if we do it with the business and we engage the people and we bring them into the process, and we are doing it yes, there's a core team, yes, there's a core government structure, but if we're doing it together, it's like if you and I were doing something, an activity, and we were talking and we were communicating, like this podcast, right? And we got to the end of the podcast and we released it, and am I going to say, oh, it's terrible? No, because we did it together. If you just recorded me saying various things and then put that out as a podcast or whatever, am I I going to say, oh, that's great? Well, maybe, depends what I said, but I might get really upset and I might get angry and I might get really protective because you're taking away something from me. And it's exactly the same. So what we have to remember is we're dealing with people. People are emotional. People have feelings. People, particularly at work, build up their own empires and their, areas of influence. And if you come along starting to change that, depending on who they are and where they sit, etc., you will get various levels of resistance. And the difference that I found in organizations is always in the people.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds and it sounds a very it does sound a very straightforward response, but it's one of the most complicated things to master, and I don't think I'm fully there myself. So it was a
No,
journey. So case in point is that you mentioned people, so the people could be the users who you would never even know, so you've got to find out more about them. Could be
well, yeah.
yeah, and that's another topic even in itself, right? Another talking point. Your core stakeholders, your more senior stakeholders, the people that are and that work for you or with you, and then you've got to think about the other element that you just mentioned about people is the people are not always just the person that you see suited and booted or playing that role. That person
Absolutely.
has multiple roles. They're a family person. They are
Absolutely.
a child. They're a son or daughter, whatever it is, and they're
That's
going to
right.
have real feelings outside of
And it
the
changes.
initiative. It changes indeed. It's transient, and it's a good point. I'm always having to remind myself that. So thank you for raising that, because those the people are just not the title, right? They are the human, the whole self.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned, the users who we never even get to meet, and, actually, we need to meet them, because if we're making a change, that is the point. It's
Yeah.
not top down, diktat, do as I say. I mean, to a degree, it is, because let's get real here. We have senior execs, leaders in the business to give direction, to make sure the business is going in the direction that's needed to meet the needs of the shareholders, the owners, etc., to be profitable, usually, to meet the stated objectives and aims of the business. That's what the board is there to do. That's their remit. It's not to make sure everybody necessarily is happy. It's to make sure the business is viable, strong, meeting its goals, is compliant. If there are legal regulations to uphold, maybe for banking, for example, or actually not even, retailers with, data protection. Well, not just, retailers with data, but PCI DSS, for card payments. There are so many regulatory things that need to be adhered to. Financial accounts. These are all things that the board needs to make sure are happening, because ultimately they are responsible. Because if it goes wrong, as we talk about, I think later we're going to talk about, how does an exec's mind work? Well, the executive is thinking about a lot of different things than, say, the project manager is thinking about, or the person in the shop is thinking about, or even ahead of, and so what we have to understand is they don't know, and I've sat on the board, so I know this, we maybe in a long distant past, we've all started somewhere, and so we have an inkling for many roles, so in most of the retailers I've worked in, I've been to stores, for example, or when I was working for an FMCG, I've been to the warehouse. So I've been to so many warehouses, and I've never worked in warehousing, but as a leader, as a program leader, as somebody making change, as a director, I've been to stores, I've been to warehouses, I've visited suppliers. I haven't yet talked to customers, but all these different groups, we need to be talking to them, and that is one of the key differences. And I'm jumping the gun slightly about, because I know we're going to come onto it, but how and what factors do you look for, the kind of the green and red flags in terms of change? So change programs, how do you know it's going to work or not? Well, one of the ways is right at the beginning when we're talking about these things. We're talking about a change, or not even a change, just direction of the business. How do we communicate that out? Who do we communicate it to? Do we actually just talk and not listen? Are we actively listening? Are we taking on board the feedback? Not necessarily to change our minds, but to take it into account. And if we are listening, is it empty listening, or are we actually going to do something about it? What are we listening for? And so these are all things that start to build up that picture, because then as a board, and we could say, oh, we're going to, we want to increase profit by 20%, make it happen. What does that mean? How are we going to do that? And so
You probably need to speak to people to find that out, don't you?
Exactly. So I remember I was at one client, and I went to visit a store, and firstly they were extremely surprised that somebody from technology and business change had come to see them, because they'd never been visited by anybody from technology before, which I found astounding. But anyway, so they were like, okay, what do we do with you? Okay, so I'm saying, tell me about your work, your daily life. How does the technology technology in store help or hinder you? And once they got over the shock that I was actually asking for their opinion and I wanted to know for real what was happening, they started to tell me. But you could see the skepticism in that they didn't expect anything to happen. And so, of course, I thought, okay, fine. So you've told me, great. And I then spoke to other stores as well because I was doing lots of store visits. But I went back to head office. I went back to the team. We gathered some more information and then we started fixing things. And then I went back to the store to see how it impacted them, the changes that we'd implemented. And they were delighted. Absolutely, because they'd got changes and fixes and things were better, but they'd been listened to and we'd done something about it. They felt valued. And that's why I say it's about the people, because the technology in itself isn't going to make the change. The people are. And so it's about how we communicate, how we engage. We talk about productivity. Why are people not productive? Because they're not engaged. And it sounds really simple. And on some levels, it is. But if we can get that communication right, if we can get the engagement right, we solve a lot of problems. That person who is really vociferous and anti whatever we're doing, bring them in, get them engaged, talk to them. Why do they not think it will work? Understand, listen, take that feedback in, get a bigger picture. I'm not saying just do what they say, but take on board their concerns, their fears. Why? Maybe they've been in the business for 20 years and they've seen this happen multiple times, and they have seen programs, changes fail multiple times, and maybe they actually know something really valuable, but they've become cantankerous over the years, cantankerous to you and I. To them, they're perfectly fine, right? But listen to them, bring them on board, talk to your customers. If we're making a change, is that going to benefit? What is it going to deliver? We see so much busyness. We have the idea from on high, and to be fair, the board doesn't know the detail. They don't need to know the detail. They're setting the vision, they're setting the guideline, they're setting the direction and pathway of the journey. That's what the board is doing.
So you mentioned a feard things about the board almost at a high level, of course. I'd really love to get into that more as well, because
Sure.
you clearly outlined how you get into the customer's mind or the user's mind, and that could be an internal user or whoever. Where do you think the board sits in that space? Do you think I've got a view myself in this? I kind of think that boards should take a bit more, depending on where they are and the type of industry, involvement in the end users, and that probably doesn't happen that often. I've not sat on boards in the same way that you have, but I've met a few board members, and there's some examples that I've got which have been really good in terms of how successful they've been. What's your view, and what's two things? What's on the board's minds in terms of when they say we need to increase our profit to revenue by 20%, and then how does that translate to their willingness to get involved in the actual user and get close to the customer at a reasonable level?
Yeah, so the first one, it's financial. So it's either because it could be a company listed on the stock exchange, so there are shareholders. Shareholders have an expectation of dividends, increasing value, because they bought shares and they want the value of the shares to go up. That's the nature of it's not complicated. You have growth companies, so they'll be looking for growth. You have stable companies, so typical blue chip, say, I don't know, Shell is a traditional BA, traditional big blue chip company who they're not growing, not really, but what they are doing is they're paying out substantial dividends. So profitability directly leads into either growth, because you're able to then invest more in your business and then you can grow through investment, and or it leads directly to dividends, which then get paid out to shareholders, and then the shareholders happy. If you can do both, happy days. So the board is very focused, if they're a listed company, on keeping the shareholder happy or shareholders happy. If it's owned by an individual or it's privately owned by a number of individuals or private equity, it's a similar thing, but just not listed. So it might be a high net worth individual owns the company. It could be a private equity company. What do they want? They want growth. They want value creation. They want dividend, because typically, if it's a high net worth individual that owns the company, that dividend is going into their pocket. So they're growing the company, they're growing the value, but that money is their money. So the board is very much focused on delivering the value as set out by the owners, because remember, they're two different things. The board does not own the company. The owners own the company, whether they're shareholders, whether they're individuals, family offices, PE, whatever. And so the board's duty is to make sure the company is legally, not running risk of falling foul of legality and, its legal obligations. Its duty is to the owners to be profitable. So their mindset is, we need to keep control of cost. We need to maximize revenue because we're looking at gross margin, and we need to make sure we mitigate risk. And they're the levers that they're looking at. So everything that the board does is looking at how can we manage and maintain and cut cost? How can we maximize revenue, because that gives us our margin and therefore profitability? How can we mitigate risk? That's it, And so yes, there are nuances around that and how we do that and lots of detail, but broadly, that's it. And so how involved are they in the day-to-day? Well, it depends on the size of the company. In huge companies, they're not. And to a degree, they can't be, because they have so many things and calls on their time that they can't possibly. And that's why we have a hierarchy. But as the company gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and all the way down to startups, if you've only got 5 overview, right? And there's one who's the CEO and one who's maybe a CTO, and maybe that's it in terms of board level. You're very close to the users, you're very close to the stakeholders, so you are definitely involved. But as you get bigger, you can't possibly be. But what the board can do is, because I'm sure you've been there, where companies have had company away days, or company conferences, or town halls perhaps, where senior leaders who you rarely see on a day-to-day basis will stand up and present the vision. Maybe it's a digital change, maybe it's the quarterly review, whatever it might be, will present things to you. And so what is vitally important when you're going through business change is that the board is front and center, is visibly supporting the change, and is giving backing to those who are involved on a day-to-day basis. So when we start to set up the governance, you can't just say, okay, we need to do this, we're going to make a change, yes, here's the money to make this, I don't know, a new ERP or whatever it might be, just picking some technology out of the air, we're doing this thing, here's some money, go away and do it, tell me when it's done. No, because that's one of the pitfalls. If you do that, it becomes disconnected. And so what we have to do is, and what I do is, so one company I was brought in to work with the board as basically their go-between between them, who were too busy basically. It's not that they weren't interested. Let's not make that mistake. They are interested, but they're too busy. They have other priorities that they need to look at. So I was there supporting the board to oversee this digital transformation program. So it was a WCMS implementation across 4 or 5 of their brands. So a really big deal to this business. And they had a program team, they had a program board, but I was there as a board level member to be sat on that board, to be the face of the board, to make sure that the program team and the program itself were delivering what the board required, and then work with the board and be that interface back to them to say, okay, is it going to deliver what you think it's going to deliver? So to answer your point, it is about making sure we retain that connectedness. And if the board gets too far away, we need to work out ways of getting them back, or providing that interface back in, because what we have to do is to maintain that that line of communication, because it's about the hearts and minds. Again, it's one of these cliches. We have to win the hearts and minds. But it's true, because we're dealing with people. The people, if you will, at the bottom need to feel engaged. They need to be engaged, because it needs to not be a sham. And so the people at the top need to show it and prove it. Do as I do, not what I say. You've got to walk the walk.
I agree. And that's why I look at some leaders at a maybe a different level. I read about Sam Walton, who started Walmart many decades ago. They are currently, if not the, or still one of the highest revenue businesses on the planet. He, as the company was scaling, he used to dedicate time to go to one of the stores and literally stack shelves, literally speak to customers, literally find out exactly what's gone on the floor. Now, I'm sure he could not do that every week, right? But he made time every now and again to do that. And I think he got some valuable insight, and that helped him to understand the difference between what he's requesting at the board level versus what is actually happening day to day. And I suspect he gained a lot from that, and the business thrived as a result of that and scaled a lot. So there's a balance, because you want your boardroom to not be dealing with day-to-day problems every day, because then they can't do the rest of their job. There's a balance they need to strike, and it's tough, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, one great example is from Semco. So it's a Brazilian company in South America, and this is going back a while, so this is not a new thing. So in the early mid 80s, Ricardo Semler, he's actually a well-known now and well-established business transformation guru. Basically, he grew Semco from I think it was, if I remember the figures, it was something like $4 million profit to $212 million profit. So this was in 1984, I think, or 85, something like that, to the early 2000s, so 2002 or something. So in a less than 20-year period, he'd scaled it from being 4 million to 212. And one of the things he did was that, because he suffered from inflammation, so he suffered from stress. So he said, right, okay, we've got to be able to do this better. We can't just be command and control. It doesn't work. It's limiting the company. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to join the company. So he said to his dad, if I'm going to join, we have to change. So the dad said, oh, all right. His dad was getting older, so he said, all right, fine. Anyway, so one of the things he did was he empowered the people on because they make tires. That's one of the things that they make. They made tires, for cars and what have you. And he empowered the people on the production line to choose what they made. So which type and brand of tires, whether it's winter tires, summer tires, whatever. And what they found was, and obviously they gave them the data, so they knew what the sales were, they knew what the stock levels were. And what they found was productivity went up, but sales went up, because what they were doing, what the workers were doing, is they knew what was going out of stock, and they knew the seasonality, and they knew what was going to sell. So they made stock in time to meet demand, because they could see it, because they were on the ground. And so the profitability and the sales for the company company went up because now they had stock. Because clearly, if you have a product, you can't sell thin air. So if you were selling yellow t-shirt and you had none on the shelf, well, you can't sell it, can you? So what the workers were doing was making sure they had enough stock at the right time, the customers could come in and buy it. And so it's things like that. It's this guy in the store who nobody had been into the store. He had lots of problems in that store, and he wasn't the only one, right? He was an example of many, many stores in the estate. But by going there, talking to them, doing their job, understanding their, and this is why I said right at the beginning, the end users, they're exactly the people we want to be talking to, because they're the people doing the job. And what we need to understand is, what are your blockers? And I think when we spoke previously, I told you about this example about one company I was in. There was a lady, the example. One lady, they said she was lazy. She really wasn't. She didn't have the tool for the job. I got her the tool for the job. It was a laptop, very expensive laptop. Got her the tool for the job. Of course, her productivity went up. But what it did was it unblocked the product launch life cycle. So that period of time to get product from, ultimately from design stage, but from when the photographs were taken to getting it launched on the website and into store, it shortened that process by 2 weeks, one laptop. And so, but previously, and the resistance that had been met was that it's a £4,500 laptop. We cannot possibly spend that money on a laptop for her. And it missed the point. And this is where we need to then be looking at, and this is where, my work with boards is to be understanding that, yes, it's £4,500 that goes on your balance sheet, but the impact is this, and it's far greater than 4.5K, right? And it's a blocker. So, but you'd only know that by talking to the person on the ground. So it's absolutely vital to get out and about, but you can't have the board doing that all the time because that's not their job. But what you have to do, and what the board needs to do, is to employ people, engage people, so that the manager down or the manager down or the manager down has the culture where, and actually the person at the bottom can say, the bottom, this is a blocker. We need to do this because it's going to hit, like the people at Semco, on the production line. They empowered the people on the production line to make decisions within a framework, of course, but this is where we need to get to, where we are engaging and empowering people, treating them basically like adults, because, you said it earlier, the title doesn't matter so much. The level doesn't matter so much. How and where do people get involved? Everybody in a company is important because it's an ecosystem. It's all together. If I start taking bits out and I take out a lower level, can we still be as efficient as with them in? Maybe, but I would argue probably not. That's not to say you can't reorganize and you can't, some people will naturally go, some people need to be exited, other people will be brought in. But it's understanding that everything works together and nothing is done in isolation, and so a lot of my work is not just in that technology silo. We talk of verticals, and we have the technology, we have marketing, we have sales, we have whatever. Actually, yes, and we need that depth, but we need that broad view across. And so what the board needs to do, and is to have the voices in the board that can go across the business as well, because it is an ecosystem and it is all bound together. And, a bit like the butterfly effect, you make a change here, so the one laptop here, the ripple effect was that it fixed a bigger problem that maybe they didn't even understand it was there. They didn't know that you could shorten this process by 2 weeks. Nobody at board level said we need to shorten the process by 2 weeks, but that was the consequence of doing the thing. And so that's what I'm talking about, is that yes, you've got top down, but you need to encourage bottom up, because what you need to do is you need to encourage and enable your people to thrive, and you need to give them the environment in which they can take some decisions, they can be engaged, they can have a say, and that they're listened to. And this is day-to-day operations as well as change, because if you do that, then you'll get better productivity, then you'll get better results, faster, quicker, cheaper. I'm sure we're going to talk about, the typical signs that a program project will fail. This ties into that, because when your systems break down, your ecosystem breaks down, that's when you get problems. That's when
great.
it starts
Great
to go wrong.
When you were speaking, it just reminded me of the fact that there's still a lot of buying that needs to happen in project teams or scrum teams or program teams, because they're still quite far removed from the more senior leadership. And what you might find quite often is there's a disconnect between what the priority is at the boardroom versus what the project objective is and what its perceived outcome is meant to be. Have you experienced that? And if so, what have you done to sort of close that gap and close the loop with the teams?
This happens on every single change initiative. This is like change 101. This is communication. So these are all the things I talked about before. It's the vision, it's the communication, it's the engagement, it's the doing it with the business, not doing it to them. It's things like, goodness, the number of initiatives I've seen where senior leaders have said we need to do X, whatever that might be, and typically it's system related, so change, an upgrade, whatever. And it's like, there you go, technology team, you do it because it's technology, right? You deliver it. Yeah, you're smiling, you know this. And it's thrown over the fence. Immediately, that's a red flag, because as soon as you've now made a disconnect, because by throwing it over the fence to the technology team and saying, this is what we want, you do it. We're off to do day-to-day operations. Lovely. Now you're concentrating on this. The tech team is kind of thinking, right, okay, well, I don't work in finance. I don't work in marketing. I don't work in, logistics. I don't know the ins and outs. And as we said, the nuances of, and yes, of course, we have business analysts, and we're going to send the business analysts to talk to the business, and we're going to get the requirements, and they're going to tell us, and they're going to say, well, it needs to be like this, and this is how we work, and we'll have all the swim lanes and process flows, and we'll have all of that. And then we go back into our silo and we start beavering away, configuring, building, coding. And then we show it, whether it's agile, waterfall, it doesn't matter. We show it that's just a timeline thing. We show it to the business, and then they say, not what we wanted. How many times have you heard that?
Far too many times, to be fair.
Far too many times. The reason, as soon as we threw it over the fence, disconnect. So what we have to do is, as we talked about before, the board needs to be represented on the steering board. The board needs to be engaged in the change operationally. That's what, so for example, the client I mentioned, they couldn't do that. So I did it. I was the board representative. So I would go back to the board. I would understand their needs. I would speak to the program team, the wider business. I would understand their needs. I would bring the two together. So I was the connector. So that disconnect didn't exist because I was there. Similarly with transformation. So yes, we have all the technology team. Great. That's one part of it. But where are the subject matter experts from the business? Where are the business champions? They need to be embedded in the change in the program. They need to be working on it day to day. Their roles in the business, their day-to-day work needs to be backfilled. This is one of the disconnects that happens, is that a business will say, we need to do X, whatever, ERP implementation, it's my favorite, just because it's big. So we're implementing a new ERP. Off you go. Yes, maybe we have an SI, maybe we have some consultants. Great. Maybe we have some people there who know their stuff about the system and finance and what have you. Great. But they're not the finance people in that company. So what we have to do is we have to take key people out of their day jobs and put them in the change, so that the change is happening business wide. It's not a technology change. It's a business change, digital, as we call it now, and so that is the key thing. So we have effectively, the change is like a mirror company, because we have all the functions within the change function. We have technology within the change function. We have board level leadership within that change function, because then when we land it back into the main business, it's not been done to us. It's not been thrown over the fence back into the business and say, here you go. It's been done with trusted, respected people within the business. Now, are they going to say it's rubbish? No, because they've been working on it full time. That's how you win.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally concur with that approach. And you're kind of getting into cross-functional teams and overarching business agility as well.
It's an ecosystem.
Yeah, indeed.
That's the key thing that is missing. Business is an ecosystem where everybody, you might not think it, but everybody interacts together. Everything fits together. And as soon as we start separating it out and saying, oh, that's only technology, or that's only marketing, or it's only whatever, that's where it starts to fail. Because then we have our lanes, we have nobody looking across the piece. That's when it starts to fail, because business is not isolated. If I gave you a whole new tech suite for you in your office, so where you're sat now, right? I changed all your programs, I changed your laptop, I changed your mic, your camera, and I said, here you go, Cliff, we've got you better technology. We've tested it, it looks great, it's a brilliant setup, best setup in the world. Here you go. How do you feel now? I'm just smiling. I know what you're going to say.
Well, it depends. If is it what I asked for? Is it what I need? Do I know how to use it? All sorts of questions have come to my mind.
Exactly. Is it any good? You say it's good, but is it? Can it do this? Exactly. But that's exactly how the businesses are feeling. And so imagine now the scenario. I said, right, Cliff, and you've said to me, my kit is old. It doesn't do all the things I need it to do. Actually, we need to refresh it. We need to upgrade it, because then I can be more productive. Now I can do, more podcasts. I can create more output and outcomes that will benefit the business, right? So we say, okay, let's work out what that looks like. And we say, come on, Cliff, come into the workshops. Let's work that out. So you're part of the solution. Now, I'm not asking you to do all the detail. I'm not asking you to select the actual camera or the actual laptop or to spec up the memory or whatever it might be. That's the details. Yes, technical people can do that. But if I engage you and I bring you involved, and then all through that process, I'm saying, okay, so look, look, this is what this camera looks like, and this is what a different camera looks like. Which do you think is going to suit your needs more? Is it this camera or this camera? And you're making choices as we go, and then we go through that process, and then I say, here you are, Cliff, here's your new kit setup. How are you going to feel?
Oh, clearly much better, well informed, engaged. I feel as
Exactly.
though it was
Obviously, we
my
train you.
solution. Absolutely.
Exactly what you said. It's my solution.
Yeah, we co-created.
Bingo, we
Yeah, there you
co-create.
go.
And now, if there was another person in your team who did the same job as you, what are you going to say to them?
Well, I'd want them to have the same experience as me, clearly.
Exactly. And so you're going to say it's brilliant because this is something that I've
Absolutely.
co-created.
Yep.
That's what we need. That's what we want. So
Def-
that people like you, people like, me, whoever in the teams are then the evangelists for the change because you were part of the process. It's your solution. It's not my solution. If I do it to you, great. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe you'll be happy, maybe you won't. Maybe you think, oh, actually, it should have been that camera, not this camera. Actually, I don't like PCs. I prefer Macs. But by engaging you and making it a solution that we build together, you're happy because I'm now listening to you. Because if and I'm giving you some choices, we're working together. You're bought in, and that's what I say. If you were the most resistant person, you said, no, I can't possibly change my camera. It's the best camera in the world, right? So you're absolutely the person I need to bring in because I need to show you and prove to you. So why can't you change from this camera to these other ones that are better? Why are they not better? Because maybe actually, and we don't like to say this, maybe you're right. Maybe your camera is better, and these newer ones, for whatever the reason, they're not the solution. Because we like to be busy, we like to do things, we like to have our pet projects, we like to be continually evolving. Sometimes that's not the right thing because what we haven't discussed is what we're doing actually delivering the outcomes, the outputs that deliver the outcomes that we need? Because it's easy to be busy, but are we doing the right things? We talk about moving the needle, it's another cliche. Is it moving the needle? Is it giving us what we need? Or are we just being busy because somebody said, oh, we need to change, we need to fix this? Do we? In what way? And that's the other part of it. Because we talk about where things go wrong, it's because we're changing things just because AI is a great one, just to keep it really fresh and on top. AI is amazing. It can do already some incredible things. Is it going to be something that has multiple use cases? 100%. Is it something that many, many businesses are going to want to be using? Absolutely. Are lots of businesses wasting many, many hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds on stuff that they don't need in AI? Yes, absolutely. Why? Because they don't know what they need. But we need to do AI. And this is something that, I was reading a paper the other day actually about, I think it was in the US, but it was with, VCs and PE companies where they've suddenly realized that a lot of companies have been spending many, many hundreds of millions of pounds and dollars on things that aren't actually delivering what they promised because we don't know what we're delivering. There is no outcome and output. We haven't defined it yet because we've rushed ahead into doing and we haven't spent the time to work out what is it we're doing, why are we doing it, what do we think it's going to give us, and is that what we want and need, and what our customers and our users want and need. So do you even need that camera? Maybe your camera is absolutely fine. Yes, there are better cameras, but for your role, maybe that's perfectly fine. And again, so if I don't ask you, how do I know?
Indeed.
And it comes back to that ecosystem where we're in it together. And so everything we do has to be with that in mind.
Fantastic. That's great. So it's funny, as you were speaking again, there's so many things that did come to my mind. Many of them just disappeared as well because there was too many of them. But anyway, one of those things that I was thinking about was just a bit about what you touched on before about projects failing. And it was kind of the fact that there are projects that fail and there are products that fail. And sometimes the two are not the same, right? But there are always flags and warning signs that you might see in advance. And sometimes for me, I always get a sinking feeling when I know something's about heading off the wrong track, and then I start to dig deeper and figure out what that might be. I'm quite interested to know from you, or maybe if you've got more of a helicopter view at a board level or if the CCO level, what are the warning signs that you tend to pick up on that enables you to think, okay, right, I need to take action, or this is potentially going the wrong way? And how can we as change and delivery people potentially be aware of those things so that we can preempt them and be proactive about resolving?
Yeah, so there are quite a few things. Lack of governance, that's often a key one, where maybe the board says or senior leadership says do this thing and then they're not involved. And so yes, you have cross-functional teams, but if the board isn't involved, how do you know the board's going to be happy? But usually it's around communication, clarity of mission. What are we trying? It's what I said a few moments ago. What are we trying to do? Or are we just being busy? Have we actually defined? Because again, we talked earlier about mindset and mindset of the board. So the board has an idea now, whether it's regulatory regulatory, whether it's a change, whether it's whatever, doesn't matter. The board has an idea. The board says, okay, we need to do X. Okay, we've got the green light. Great. The board also needs it yesterday because, that's also the way it works. We don't need it in 2 years' time or a year's time or even 6 months, perhaps. We need it now. We need it yesterday. So the temptation, and this again is one of those warning flags, is how was the change initiative set up? Have we just raced into doing, it's that system. Let's start implementing it now because time is of the essence. So have we gone through that discovery phase? Have we gone through that really detailed strategic workshopping, mapping it to the organizational operating plan to say, how is this initiative going to impact our objectives? So we have our key objective is being more profitable. Typically, that's the business aim, to be more profitable. And usually it has a number associated with it. So this change initiative that we're doing, that we're embarking on, what is it giving that's going to lead to that number? Can we define it? Can we track it? Do we know? How will we know that we've delivered? Because if we don't understand these things and we're not able to say, are we or aren't we on track, we'll never know. And so this is where you end up with time overruns and cost overruns. We're always playing catch up. I heard this the other day. It's not an example of mine, but it's a great example. So I'm going to use it. And if the person who said it hears this, he will know that this is his example and it is from him. But he talked about thinking about it as if you're sailing. And so when you go sailing with sails, wind, not motorboat or anything. So if you're in a wind powered sailing boat and you want to go from here to here, you can't travel in a straight line. You can almost never get to your destination in a straight line because of the wind, because you can go in the direction that the wind is blowing, right? So what you have to do is what's called tacking. And basically that means you have to, from here to there, you get there by zigzagging because that's how you sail, right? You cannot just go straight. That's why cruise liners have got engines and not sails anymore, because a cruise liner can just go straight there. But if you're sailing, you have to tack, you have to zigzag. Now, as you're zigzagging, clearly you're not at your destination point. So what you have to be doing is checking, are we on course? Have we got to the waypoint that we thought we would get to? Where do we need to go now? Is it the same way? What's the wind doing? How's the organization? Have the objectives changed? Because we talk about change as something that's linear. It's from A to B. Are we going on a journey from A to B as if we're driving a car? But we're not, because it's an ecosystem. The business changes, business conditions change. The economy changes. Particularly if you're a retailer, what if your customers stop buying because there's a pandemic, we're all stuck in our houses for ever. I can't go shopping. So all these things we have to take into account. So you're talking about how do we know? So how do we know is the program team, are they tracking these things? Are we just trying to go from A to B and pretending that it's linear and nothing is going to change? There will be no variable changes at all. Or are we aware of these things? Do we have the change logs? Do we have the risk register, the issues log? Do we have regular meetings with the board, with the stakeholders, with the governance board that we've set up? We have got a governance board, right? We are governing this thing, aren't we? Yes, please say yes, because that's another red flag, because you'd be surprised how many don't, because tech are doing, right? We've got the program manager, we've got the program director, maybe, it's all in hand, right? No. Is the business still the same? That's why you need business people on board, but that's why you also need that direction, because we're sailing. So how do we know? And maybe partway through, we need to pivot. That point that we were going to, maybe that's not the point we need to go to anymore. Maybe the business has evolved and changed whilst we're working. So that's where the board needs to be. We talk about the connectedness. That's where the board needs to be connected, because what are the business priorities? What if the business priorities changed? There are so many variables. The absolute key is, are we tracking it? Are we on top of it? Are we communicating? Are we maintaining that engagement with our people who are doing the work for us? Are we engaged as a board? Is it still, I talked about that client that I was working with, where my role was to make sure that the program team was delivering what the board needed. And that was very deliberate language. I didn't say, were they delivering the system? Because that's not what I was there for. There was a program team for that. There was a program manager. That's my role, was, were they going to deliver what the business needed? The outcomes, the outputs, so that the business would have the ability to grow and move in the direction that they wanted to. In reverse, I needed to know what the board were doing and the state of the business and the wins to be able to then work with the team to make sure that they knew what the board was thinking and how they saw. It's a really apt example, the sailing, because we talk about headwinds in business. So there are strong headwinds. We cannot go in the direction that we want to. So we're going to have to pivot and tack and change direction. And that's the key. And that's how you know, because when you go into an organization, you're looking for all these things, and it's got nothing to do with the being busy. It's got everything to do with everything around it, because it's that ecosystem, and it's about the people, and it's about how it fits together. And so if it fits together really nicely, that's when you have the good feeling, and it's going to work, and it's going to work. If it doesn't fit together nicely, and there are things missing or not done, or we don't do that because we don't have the people to do that, or we're too busy to do that, or oh no, the board knows what we're doing because we tell them once a month, it's fine. That's when it fails.
Great. And there was a few things there that brought back some scary memories for me as you were speaking about disconnected boards and program teams. And I think you did right. That communication and staying connected is key, because you can't pivot without knowing what to pivot to, right?
Exactly.
And you can't pivot without knowing when things are wrong in the first place.
Exactly. And to be fair to the guys and girls in the teams, they don't know these things. It's also not their job to know these things. So that's where you have, and again, keep saying it's that ecosystem. We have the different hierarchies and layers, because the people at the board, they do know these things. And so they need to feed back down. But they also need to understand how that impacts the change. So that, again, is there that communication channel open? Who is telling the board, okay, you're saying this is what it means. Maybe we need to change what we're doing. Maybe that's going to take more time. Maybe it's going to cost more money. But it's about having that conversation and creating that environment where that conversation can exist, so that people feel empowered. The people in the team can say, that person who's sort of, the cantankerous, grumbling person, that their voice counts, because I don't know everything. You don't know everything. The board doesn't know everything. That person who's the cantankerous whatever doesn't know everything. But together we do. We know much more. Maybe not everything, but we know much more. And so again, I keep going on about the people together, working together, having that connectedness, communicating, creating that environment of trust, creating that environment where people can shout and say, hang on, this isn't working. This isn't going to work. We should be thinking about doing it this way, encouraging and enabling those ideas to come to the fore. They're the things that I look for, because they're the things that will make sure that your initiative, your change will be a success. And when it's very rigid and structured and linear, and we go from here to there and just get on with it, that's when it fails, because it's an ecosystem. Things change. Things are always changing. If I asked you about your business a month ago, is it the same business with exactly the same people doing exactly the same things today? And I guarantee you the answer is no. It's changed. Maybe it's a tiny change, maybe it's a big change, maybe it's a big change in one area and a small change in another, but it's definitely changed. And this is what we're dealing with. And so is the business geared up to change? Or is it saying, oh, the change is happening over there, it's happening to us, we're not involved? And the successful ones are involved. The unsuccessful ones, it's over there, someone's doing it to us. And that's how you know.
Indeed, an amazing way to end the episode for today. I've covered
Pleasure.
probably about a fraction of what I wanted to cover, and I expected nothing less from you, because you're full of nuggets, and you've got multiple books in you, as somebody once said to you.
Yeah, well, maybe.
And I'll be looking forward to signing up for that book and getting your autograph when the time comes.
My wife says a lot of hot air, but take it as you will. I can certainly talk a lot, but yeah.
No problem, and that's
pleasure.
good. That's what we're here for. So this is great. Lots of nuggets, lots of good takeaways, and all I have to say to you today, David, is thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Today.
Thank you for having me. Absolute pleasure.
Fantastic. And for everybody listening and watching, you'll get more on David in terms of the notes and comments later on down the line. You can also contact me on changeleadersplaybook.com. You can get the newsletter with even more information about David and more besides. Other than that, that's it for today. And thank you very much. And I'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.